here we're going to get going. Did anybody see anyone who looked like this walking in? Any zombies on the way in? Probably not, because we don't see zombies of the corporate executive type with blood on themselves, right? They're not as obvious. It's more subtle than that. And oftentimes you can be a zombie and not even realize it. And you're just going along until some kind of crisis hits, and then your zombiehood comes out, we could say. So our agenda for today is to understand identity as a foundation, because when you are clear on your identity and you are fully human and fully embodied in who you are definitely not a zombie, and you're able to communicate in an effective way with audience. We're going to talk about the most common zombie trait. I'm going to talk about using identity in your content. I'm going to talk fast. I tend to talk fast. If I use a word of jargon you don't know, somebody just go ahead and call out and say, what's that? I don't know what that is. That would be great. So let's talk about identity. It's easier in the beginning if we talk about this from an individual perspective versus organizational identity. So who's this? Tiger Woods. Yeah, I'm going to ask for audience participation because it's early in the morning. It's going to be really boring if I talk at you the whole time, right? So Tiger Woods, what's he known for? Golf, right? He used to be known, right, for his fantastic golf game. Yeah. So he was called the Golden Boy, right? Sponsors loved him. He's mixed race. He is a wonderful athlete. He appeared to be a very wholesome, traditional, stand-up kind of guy, that sort of thing. And then we had that Thanksgiving, and we had, do you remember what happened? Car crash, golf club, what's going on exactly? And then the whole story started to come out, right? And by the end, it was like, whoa. And we were all sitting there going, who is this guy anyway? Like, we thought he was this, but he's actually this, right? And his troubles have continued. This picture looks really zombie-like, right? Like I saw this, I was like, God, he really is looking like a zombie. There's still articles that come out that say, you don't know Tiger Woods, right? We're still trying to figure out what's going on. And so after his kind of big fall off the pedestal, the fall from grace, he didn't need help with his branding, right? There was nobody who was like, Tiger, you need to work on your brand. Even Tiger himself was like, I need a therapist, right? Like, if you listen to his apology, which is a 13-minute apology that was like 12 minutes too long. Like, the first 90 seconds are pretty good, and then you're like, just stop, Tiger, just stop. And instead he goes on and on and on and on. So if you want to see an example of what not to do to apologize, that would be a good one to look at. They're using it in classrooms around the country, I'm sure. So he even said himself, like, he needed help with a therapist. He needed help with, like, who am I and what am I doing? Because I'm not living my life the way I'm portraying to the world, right? And this happens with individuals, and maybe this has happened with you. This has happened with all of us at some point or another, where you kind of go like, the way I'm acting actually doesn't match who I am or who my best self is. And I think a lot about being fully human as a person as well as an organization is just about being truly who you are, and then attracting the right people to you who are going to resonate with your message and your values. So let's look at how this plays out from an organization point of view. So I bet some of you might recognize this kind of manifesto, as they call it. Whose is this? Some of you know this. This is Lululemon, right? They had this manifesto they put out saying, friends are more important than money, and it's kind of like love, and it's got this nice feeling about it, and they put on these bags so you can carry your lunch around in this cute bag and that sort of thing. And I really like it too, and so they have kind of built a brand around this kind of feeling. And then this guy gets on Bloomberg News TV and says, quite frankly, some women's bodies don't actually work for the product. So this is when there was this problem with their manufacturing, and their yoga pants were too sheer, so people were bending over and revealing a little bit too much, right? But instead of acknowledging we're having a manufacturing problem, he makes this comment. Look at the face of his wife next to him. She's like, what'd you just do? And if you watch the interview, you can see the Bloomberg reporter's like, I can't believe he just said that. And because what it did was it left everybody going, who is this organization selling yoga pants anyway, right? Like, this isn't a really friendly comment he made. And social media exploded around this. And this happened in 2013, and it was only in 2017 that the company recovered from the reputation damage. So they were seeing problems in their revenue 2014, 2015, and they think they recovered in 2017. That is a lot of damage from one person's comments, right? So I would say, though, it's not just one person, right? And I think it's a little bit hard, of course, when you have a founder who's a little bit unusual, right? So I'm guessing that a lot of you may not have power over if, like, you've got a crazy CEO. You're like, just keep this man behind the curtain, right? Or this woman behind the curtain. Like, don't let them talk to anybody. Sometimes you can't do that. But there's other people who are working around this person, right, who can help try to influence what they do. For example, I don't know if you saw this guy's apology, Chip Wilson's. It was horrible. It was worse than Tiger Woods' apology, right? So he actually didn't even help himself in his zombie state, right? So he's done something that doesn't even match with what the company's talking about whatsoever. People all of a sudden are going, who am I buying these pants from? And then he gives this apology to his own employees and not to the consumers. And the whole thing was just bizarre, just really bizarre. And this is what happens when organizations who've lost their way. They tend to communicate like zombies. And the characteristics that come up are, they're hard to understand, of like what's going on with this company. They're confusing, because zombies themselves are really confused. If you've ever seen a zombie in a show or that sort of thing, they often don't even know what happened to them. They often can't even explain their name. And they're repelling. People want to get away. So the foundation of not being a zombie is being really clear on who you are and being fully human, right? And it starts with our core values. And if anybody was in the talk by the gentleman from Adidas yesterday, I really liked it. He talked a lot about culture. And we're talking about something that's underneath culture, and that is your values, your core beliefs, how you operate in the world, and that sort of thing. They are at the center of your organization. Outside of that, as you start to go out, is what we do, right? So my values are going to come out in how I behave, what I do. A little bit farther out, it's going to go into kind of what do I look like, what am I trying to communicate, and that sort of thing. And then farther out is what we say, the written and verbal communication. The most powerful things are in the center, though, because you can say one thing and do another, right? I can say friends are more important than money, but then if my actions don't actually match that, it rings false, right? So it's about authenticity. And so you might be thinking now, how does this relate to brand? Because we talk about brand a lot. And I could go off on brand. I think there's a lot of problems with the word brand. I've run focus groups, and while we all use the word really commonly, when I run focus groups with just regular old people and I say, what comes to mind when I say the word brand? They say things like rip off, spin, stuff like that. Don't ever talk about brand outside of your own little organization. You really want to talk about identity, about who you are and what you're about. And this is how identity relates to brand, right? So it is your foundation. It is going to infuse your culture, and then it's going to affect your brand. This is your key. This is how people have explained it who I've interviewed for the book I wrote. This is Denise Haviland. She works at Duke University, which is a place very close to where I live. And she has helped done branding for Bellagio Hotel and some other different places before she came to Duke. But she talks about, it's who you portray to the public, but it is who you actually are. So ideally, that's all lined up in a nice cone, right? You're showing a piece of who you are to the public, because you probably don't need to tell them absolutely everything. But the problem is that often brands do this, right? Like, we want to be this. We're really innovative. But you're not really innovative, right? Or you're really, like, customer-centric. But you don't actually return emails that quickly. And so this comes up a lot. This is really common, right? And so oftentimes people will come with, like, a small problem or some kind of crisis communication issue, or should I be on social media? Or they come to me with a lot of questions around kind of minor tactical issues, but this is their bigger issue going on, right? And this is what makes somebody look like a zombie. You might be able to think of some companies like this, or you might go, oh no, she's talking about my company right now, right? And that's a problem. You can see how that's a problem. And is it easier to try to, like, create a brand and then kind of move it over here, or is it easier to just, like, look at your identity and who we are and let's build off of that? It's easier to build off the identity, right? Like, why would we try to create something that's not us? And who are the people who can really tell that this isn't when this is misaligned? Who can tell this? Customers sometimes. Who else? Your employees, right? These are the people, when you put out the marketing materials, roll their eyes. I see this. I've seen this. I work different places. I get to work into different companies. And they'll go, oh, yeah, marketing. You know? And that is a huge problem. So if you want to see if your content is resonating and if it's really working for the company and if they feel like it really represents the identity, put it in front of the employees. What do you think about this? Let's look at a company that's doing it well, I think, in terms of their core identity. Here's the thing, is your values are going to come out anyway, right? You can have whatever brand you want. You can say you're this or that, but the values are going to come out. They're going to come out by, a comment by the CMO or the CEO, or it's going to come out from your employees sharing information with other folks. So does anybody know who this is? Give me a guess. Financial? Around a long time. Charles Schwab. Charles Schwab has been around a really long time. Their whole thing is kind of put the customer first. This has kind of been their thing. And is anybody in here from financial services? Okay, a few people. I used to work in financial services. It's a really interesting industry. Lots going on there, right? So Charles Schwab is still around, going strong. The success they've had is ridiculous. They've served customers for 40 years. They're valued at close to $41 billion. They're entrusted with people's money. They win workplace awards. They sailed through the last financial crisis unscathed without any problems whatsoever. And what's interesting is, so when I was working on this book with my co-author and we were trying to find positive examples for our book of like who's really been human, who's really used their identity in their marketing and their content and that sort of thing, it's actually much easier to find bad examples. And so we were looking for good examples, and I said, I want to look at Charles Schwab. And my co-author said, why? And I said, because 20 years ago, I remember my friend Michelle was laid off from Charles Schwab, and the way they did it was so kind, and I remember that their CEO only took $1 in compensation that year. And so I'm going to look into Charles Schwab and see if they might fit for us. So the reason they ended up in our book, and we ended up interviewing them, is because of an experience I had with them a really, really long time ago with an employee, when they laid them off, and they said, here's $20,000 in retraining, because we're really sorry we have to lay you off. And if we need new people in the next 2 years, we're going to look at you first. We promise that. It's a pretty amazing company. So I got to interview Jonathan Craig. He's the Chief Marketing Officer at Charles Schwab. And he talked a lot about being repetitive so that everyone has a clear sense of who you are, what you stand for, what you do. He actually was saying, we don't market our products at all. We market our values. They market their values and then are looking for people who they resonate with. So market your values. Don't market your products. And trust that there's enough people out there who will resonate. So how many people in here are married? How many people are dating somebody? Okay, so that's a lot of you. You're not done dating ever, though, even if you get married, right? We're dating all the time. The web especially is just like an online dating game, right? I am looking for people I resonate with. I am looking for companies I resonate with. I'm trying to figure out where do I want to spend my money. So we're always trying to find a matching game. And the best way to match people up, I believe, is through values, because values are who we really are. What you don't want is you actually don't want a customer who comes to you and doesn't match in terms of values, because they won't like you over time. What you want to do is suss out really quickly, we're not a good match. You need to go on your way and find someone else to work for you. And you may have experienced this if you have a small place or you've done consulting or that sort of thing. There are times when there's just not a match, and that's totally okay. The client values efficiency, and you value, a really high quality or whatever. There may be just disconnects, and that's okay. So you just need to be really clear. And so when we talked to Jonathan Craig, we were like, well, how does Schwab keep everybody on board with this? And he shared about how they basically have an onboarding program for all their new employees. And in that program, they don't just talk about this is your computer and this is how you log into the system and that sort of thing, which is still kind of improved on some of the onboarding experiences I've had. They actually talk about, what do Schwab's values mean to you? Can you put it in your own words? And they go through workshops, and they practice talking to each other about what would the values look like in your own words. How do you explain them to other people if you're at a party? That sort of thing. So making sure all the employees are aligned. That's 16,000 employees they have. And he talked about how it's a really full-time job, and it's very repetitive, right? But it's worth it, because employees know. They know when the identity is not matching the marketing, right? So get your identity, get your employees on board. Make sure they're really clear in it, so when they're explaining your company to a third party, they're accurate. And they feel proud. And I want to tell you this, because some of you might be going like, you don't know what I work for. You know, you don't know who I work for, or I'm not happy with my company, or I'm not proud of who I work for. And that is a reality. And we talked to Jonathan about that, and I said, hey, Jonathan, you know, I really love what you're saying, and, you know, I really love the values that Schwab puts out there about putting the client first, and I've seen it firsthand and that sort of thing. I said, but what if you don't work for Charles Schwab? Like, what if you work for somewhere that's not so great, or you don't feel good about what they're doing? And he said, yeah, that's when you look for another job. You know, he was really clear about that, of like, you have to really look, because this is where you're putting your time and your effort every day, right? So maybe some of you after this conference go on LinkedIn and spruce up your profile a little bit, okay? And that's okay. You want to find somewhere to work where you feel like your values resonate and are reflected and you fit in.